propose to take questions 10 and 11 together. The International EU and Northern Ireland Division of my department covers work on all international EU and British, Irish and Northern Ireland affairs within the government, including on Brexit. The division assists me in my international role, including as a member of the European Council and in my other EU and international engagements. The division also provides advice to me regarding Northern Ireland affairs, British-Irish relations and, of course, on Brexit issues. This includes work to advance peace, prosperity and reconciliation on the island of Ireland, including assisting me in my engagement with the British Government and institutions established under the Good Friday Agreement and on restoration of the institutions, including the devolved Assembly and Power Sharing Executive. The division provides advice and briefing related to my varied international engagements, including meetings of the European Council and other EU summits, bilateral engagements with heads of government of EU member states and other countries and international affairs more generally. The division also works closely with other relevant departments, notably the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Augmenting the ongoing work of my department's International EU and Northern Ireland Division on Brexit is the Brexit Preparedness and Contingency Planning Unit, which assists the Secretary-General's group overseeing the ongoing work on national Brexit preparedness and contingency planning. The unit works closely with other divisions in my department, including the Economic Division, and with colleagues in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, which has overall responsibility for Brexit.
Taoiseach, you might indicate, please, whether Minister McHugh gave you any feedback from the very large conference that was held in the waterfront in Belfast at the weekend. I hope that he gave you a sense of the frustration amongst what was a very large and a very broad gathering of people, and also the sense of ambition also that was expressed in terms of Ireland after Brexit. I think it's really important that you hear those voices. I think it's really important that you have your finger on the pulse of where popular opinion is, and you're right to say that that opinion is not reflected by the DUP. You will be aware, of course, that business organisations in the north are out despairing at the fact that the backstop has been trashed at Westminster with the connivance of the DUP, and you're aware of the very serious perils that confront agriculture at these times. I want to raise with you also the issue of European foreign policy. It relates in some measure to the issue that Deputy Haughey raised around the future of Europe, the future of Ireland within Europe, the direction of Europe. We have a long-standing policy of military neutrality and of independent foreign policy. But I heard you say in Davos, and I hope I'm quoting you right, I think that Europe really needs to be able to have a common foreign policy. I think you're entirely on the wrong track there. I think our neutrality, our independence in foreign policy matters in accordance and chiming with our historical experience is extremely important. We need to know your view on sovereignty, on fiscal sovereignty, and on a previous occasion, while you were away on a previous occasion, Taoiseach, I asked that you need to set out your vision, your government's vision of the future of Europe. You weren't there on that occasion, but I want to repeat that call again today. We need to know where your government stands on these issues.
If people are going to consume all the time, there will be nothing left by way of time for a reply. Deputy Burton.
I'd like to ask you, what's the position of your government, Taoiseach, in relation to the recently agreed German-Franco Treaty, which of course has a lot of implications in relation to Europe, and whether you foresee that particular treaty impacting on the future of the European Union, including Ireland's role in the European Union. Secondly, I'd like to know how many people roughly in your department are working on the bid for the UN Security Council. And thirdly, and given the weekend that's coming up, are you intending to travel to Japan for the World Cup later in the year? Because there is no doubt with the very negative developments really that have happened in the UK, Ireland will have to really make a much stronger push in terms of its global presence and global agreements if, as it seems at the moment, the pro-Brexit voices in the UK prevail and may even crash out of the EU. In that context, again, I just want to ask you, in terms of your officials on the northern desks, it's really important. I mean, you mentioned there are many parties in the north of Ireland, but the point about the DUP is the DUP is the largest unionist party, and to be honest, people like John Hume would never have made any progress if they hadn't reached out to talk to people with whom they had very serious difficulties, so as to try and ultimately go on and resolve, through the Belfast Agreement, an All-Ireland framework for progress to be made. And that's why I would like to know, it's not that we're in agreement with the DUP position, but they have a position. They're not the majority. The majority of people in the north voted to remain, but we need to know what your approach to the DUP is.
Deputy Haughey.
I think the Taoiseach ran out of time and he wasn't able to answer the question I posed in the last round of questions. So I won't be rambling this time, if I was rambling, and it might give you an opportunity to praise your Minister of State, Helen McEntee, who conducted this citizens' dialogue in relation to the future of Europe. But the report that she produced finishes with the sentence, "In advance of this summit, we will publish a statement on our strategic priorities for the European Union, capturing the views which have been submitted to set out Ireland's vision for the coming years." Could I ask you, when that statement will be produced, and can the Dáil be fully involved in that debate in relation to the future of Europe?
Yeah, at some point in the future, Taoiseach, there will come a point when relations will be rebuilt on this island and with London. So far, there have been very few details available on any discussions that there may have been on this point. It was said during the past month that you, Taoiseach, want to have some form of annual joint cabinet meeting along the lines of the Franco-German meeting. Other than this, we've heard absolutely nothing, and we certainly have not been consulted on anything. This is another example. I think that meetings are called and so on, but we don't really get any substantive detail, and the media inevitably is briefed in advance. Now, I put forward proposals on this issue publicly, and I would like you to tell us, Taoiseach, what levels of discussions have been held about new bilateral structures, because once Britain leaves the European Union, there will be an enormous gap, and in my view, the European Union was a context for a very significant development of relationships between Irish and British ministers, successive ministers and officials. That in itself was a catalyst for the Good Friday Agreement and the familiarity that people worked with each other and developed over or due to our EU membership. So irrespective of the nature of the future relationship between the UK and the European Union, there are always and will be substantive bilateral issues which will fall within the remit of the Common Travel Area, for example, and other issues. So what we need is substantive and ongoing contact and structures at official and political level, and this can't be allowed to become focused on annual photo opportunities. It will involve hard, unglamorous work. So if there is a no-deal Brexit in 58 days' time, Taoiseach, what arrangements for bilateral discussions and negotiations are ready?
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach, you have 3 minutes to respond.
Thank you, Concordia. Yes, Minister McHugh did brief me on the meeting in Belfast at the weekend, and I know was very well attended and seems to have been a very successful event. And I hope that if there is a follow-up event at some point in the future, that I'll be able to attend in person and continue to engage with that important body of society in Northern Ireland. In terms of European foreign policy, of course, Europe already has a common foreign and security policy, and we have a common defence policy in the form of PESCO, which Ireland is part of. PESCO is quite new. We're going to see how it develops on a case-by-case basis. We'll get involved in various security projects, but that will not involve Ireland taking part in a putative European army, nor will it involve us getting involved in any military alliances. In terms of the common foreign security policy, I think it needs to be a lot stronger. I think it could work a lot better. And I think that Europe can be a force for good when it comes to foreign policy. We have an increasingly multipolar world, a very strong America, but an America that is abdicating the kind of global leadership that it had in the past, and emerging an increasingly influential China, and a lot of other countries that are very much coming on the world stage, whereas Europe's population and wealth as a proportion of the world continues to decline. And I think that if we want to promote European values and ideals in the world, then we need to have a stronger European common foreign policy. And that means leading on issues like international development, on Africa, on climate change, on combating terrorism and security threats, on crises in places like Syria and Ukraine, where Europe, acting together and acting as one, I think could have done better and could have helped bring peace and security to those places. I note in the last couple of days, a number of European countries have taken action or indicated action against Venezuela. And as unfortunately we don't all agree, but I think the majority of people in this House agree that what's happened in Venezuela is really terrible. If you go back 20 or 30 years ago, Ireland was ranked 20th in the world in terms of human development by the United Nations. We've gone up to 4th place. Venezuela was 40, weren't all that far behind us, and now they've gone to 70th or 80th place. And it shows what the effect of socialist policies and anti-democratic policies have on a country. Increased maternal mortality, increased neonatal deaths, a refugee crisis, abject poverty, and the removal of people's democratic freedoms. And a number of European countries are taking a stronger stand on this. They're calling for the restoration of democracy in Venezuela, calling for free and fair elections, and we want people in that country to have security and democracy and human rights and hope again. But that was done by 4 countries. I think perhaps it would have been more effective if we'd done that as an EU of 27. And they're the kind of areas where I think the European Union can be a force for good and standing up to some terrible badness and evil that is happening in that country of Venezuela at the moment. In terms of the UN Security Council bid, that is led by the Department of Foreign Affairs, so there's nobody in my department whose specific job it is to work on that, but obviously we've a supporting role, and very many of us are involved in that in many different ways. I can't recall of any plans to travel to Japan at present. I'm not sure if you've even got an invitation yet, so no plans.
There's a sporting encyclopedia in the form of Seán Ross.
Perhaps he shall travel. But I've no plans at present. But a lot can happen between now and September.
We're out of time now, Taoiseach, so we have to conclude.
Okay, I might just very briefly say that obviously with the DUP we listen to their views and respect their views, but it is generally an exchange of views. We don't see eye to eye on these matters. On the future of Europe, I would very much welcome a Dáil debate. I don't know where we are with the statement. I'll have to check with Mr McEntee, but I do think she did a really good job on the public consultations and is really doing a stellar job as a minister at the moment. On bilateral structures between the UK and Ireland, I'd envisage the BIIGC, the British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference, which is created under the Good Friday Agreement, being upgraded and perhaps being used as an opportunity for us to meet as government ministers. Currently we run into our counterparts at least 4 times a year at EU Council meetings. That will be gone within a few months, and I think upgrading the BIIGC might be the bilateral mechanism we could use to make sure that we're continually engaging regularly with our UK counterparts.
Thank you, Taoiseach.